Now, there have been some sweeping changes to anti-abortion legislation in states across the country. And to be quite honest, I was looking to stay out of the conversation. I mean, firstly, all of my reproductive organs are on the outside of my body, just in case anyone was confused or wanted to know about that. Also, we're probably a good 10 to 15 years and several surgeries before I would even be able to consider the possibility of carrying a child myself. So, really something that I feel like I should have to weigh on too much, or that is even my place to speak about so much, right? But then I caught this in my feed the other day, so I figured I would share it with the class. This is Fox News primetime host Ben Domenech giving his 2 cents on abortion legislation, right? So let's just jump right into that.
We have, as a nation, one of the most radical abortion regimes in the world. It might surprise you to know this. You certainly won't hear it from anyone on any other network. But that supposedly extreme Mississippi law, headed for the Supreme Court, which would block most abortions after 15 weeks, would be right at home in Europe, when all those nations the left wants to emulate in other areas of policy, like France and Sweden, ban abortion.
So let's take a look at that. 27 European countries limit elective abortion to 12 weeks gestation. So Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, all right, Belarus, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Georgia, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Montenegro, Moldova, Northern Ireland, because we won't be mentioning the United Kingdom in this one, North Macedonia, Norway, Russia, Slovakia, Switzerland, and the Ukraine, for those only catching this in the audio, are the 27 European countries who limit elective abortion to 12 weeks gestation. And again, Ben is making reference that our abortion laws are just so egregious and extreme, and yet these countries pretty much have it right at 12 weeks gestation, right? So let's continue for just a second.
In fact, all the countries you see on your screen ban elective abortion at 12 weeks. None of them have what America effectively has in many states, abortion up to the point of birth. For that, you have to look at our moral equals in nations like China or North Korea.
So let's take a look at that. As far as moral equals, well, in France, they allow abortion up to 12 weeks after conception. So 14 weeks after menstrual periods. So depending on how you calculate how pregnant a person is or how far along in the pregnancy they are, they will allow abortion in later periods if a physician certifies that there's physical or mental health risk to the patient, risk of life or otherwise. Or even if the child may suffer from an array of incurable illnesses. Now, in Northern Ireland, it's a similar story, at risk of physical or mental health, or if any of the existing children are also at risk. And they'll allow that up to 24 weeks. 24 weeks. Sounds very Roe v. Wade to me, but I'm just saying. In Switzerland, it's legal at any time with medical indications that the patient may suffer severe physical or psychological damage at any time. Anytime. In Azerbaijan, the number of children exceeds 5. They allow abortion past that time period also, and so on and so forth. I mean, need I continue? In Mississippi, which is also different from the majority of the countries that were listed, there is no exemption to things like rape and incest. None whatsoever. And that is something that we've seen echoed in a lot of this new legislation here in the United States, is that just no regard for cases involving rape or incest. So let's continue. Still, Ben Domenech, still, this is misleading at best. I mean, how do you even call that? Is this just bad journalism? I mean, you be the judge. But let's continue.
Much of the discussion around abortion is about the law. And of course, we'll talk about that tonight. But there's another law I want you to consider as you listen, and that is the law written on your hearts. Back in 1933, long before Roe, Whittaker Chambers was working as a Soviet agent when his wife found out she was pregnant. Despite the initial joy, they both knew that as communist agents, such things were not possible. His wife went to see a doctor to make arrangements. When she came back, she was quiet and noncommittal. And it slowly dawned on Chambers she wanted to keep the child. He asked her. As he writes in his autobiography, Witness, "My wife came over to me, took my hands, and burst into tears. 'Dear heart,' she said in a pleading voice, 'we couldn't do that awful thing to a little baby. Not to a little baby, dear heart.' A wild joy swept me. Reason, the agony of my family, the Communist Party and its theories, the wars and revolutions of the 20th century crumbled at the touch of the child." What we are discussing tonight is the most fundamental question for us, whether the unborn lives that take root here in America are unique persons with the right to draw breath and blossom.
So, bad journalism followed by alligator tears and a horrible, honestly, a horrifying comparison between authoritarian Soviet Union and the opposition to authoritarian, essentially fascism, specifically targeted toward women. But hey, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. All my reproductive organs are on the outside. Let's hear from a lady. Actually, let's hear from a lady speaking on behalf of several other ladies. So this is what's happening on the other channel.
Dispatches from the federal appeals court in Texas today. Quote, an abortion provider in Houston cried with her first patient after Texas's abortion ban passed. The patient had detectable embryonic cardiac activity on the day of her scheduled procedure after having none the day before, so she was unable to get an abortion. A provider in Houston recalls a patient with 5 children, 2 of whom have disabilities, who had embryonic cardiac activity at just 5 weeks, 4 days pregnant. The patient frantically pleaded, "What am I going to do? What is going to happen now?" One provider had a patient who says she, quote, put oils in her vagina to try to terminate her pregnancy and worries the abortion ban will force more people into, quote, back alley ways.
So, again, don't take my word for it. You decide. You be the judge, right? If that's not disturbing enough for you, give it a second.
One provider in Houston spoke of a 12-year-old patient who came in with her mother, a single working mother with other children. The mother said they could not travel out of state. They had barely made it to the Texas Health Center. The 12-year-old said, "Mom, it was an accident. Why are they making me keep it?" She's 12.
Now that, Ben Domenech, is the difference between the Mississippi ban, the Texas ban, and all of these other places that you mentioned. Because in all of those countries, or at least, the ones, I don't know about Azerbaijan. I didn't look too far into, what they do when they don't allow. Okay. It was getting a little bit weird after, if you have 5 children, then you can have abortions if you want to, because you already have 5 children. And I guess that's just economic stress on the state. I have no idea. But if you really can't understand the difference between the legislation that's being passed in third world United States and the legislation that's being passed in Europe and elsewhere, and you want to compare that to North Korea, and you want to compare that to authoritarianism from the Soviet Union, in the day, look no further, bro. I don't know what you folks would expect.
One patient suffers from a chronic disease for which she has been unable to get medication for 8 months. She fears the stress of the pregnancy, quote, would probably kill me. She was relieved to secure an out-of-state abortion, but was worried that because of the law in Texas, quote, they'd be waiting to drag me off to jail when I got here because I'm from Texas.
So That's the difference. If you had a hard time understanding it before, let me help you out with this. In Texas and in Mississippi, well, in Texas specifically, there is no exemptions for health risk to the patient, whether their life is in grave danger or not. If she dies, she dies. That sounds very, what was that? Rocky 5? No, Rocky 5? No, it was Rocky 4. If she dies, she dies, right? So since we're making reference to the Soviet Union, it is what it is. They're forcing a 12-year-old to give birth. I mean, if that just doesn't disgust you anyway, all of, again, not all of, but like, the countries that Ben Domenech is vacationing in and friends, they have exemptions with regard to things like the health of the patient, the health of the mother. And they also have exemptions for things like rape and incest, which in the United States, we don't believe in that kind of diatribe, I guess. That's just that's too extreme. That's too much like North Korea. Every life counts until they're born and they need food and they need healthcare and they need after that they're on their own, right? I don't get it. I don't want to. But again, all of my reproductive organs are on the outside of my body. It's going to be a little while before this is even something that I would need to consider, for my own self, in my bodily autonomy. You decide. Let me know in the comments what you think about that.